I knew something was wrong the moment the new guy showed up to a logistics warehouse at 6 in the morning, wearing Italian loafers and no socks. He called himself a thought leader while standing next to a stack of underripe bananas and a screaming driver named Buck. That was my cue. I'd been in this business for 15 years, and I could smell rot before it reached the loading dock. So when Kyle, the CEO's fresh-off-the MBA protege, walked in like he was auditioning for a leadership podcast, I braced myself. He didn't shake my hand. Just nodded, mumbled something about transition phases, and announced that my role was being restructured. Not fired, not let go. Restructured. That's corporate for disposable, but let's keep it polite. I held my expression steady. Didn't blink. 15 years teaches you when to speak and when to let amateurs dig their own graves with buzzwords and laminated charts. Kyle had a plan, of course. They always do. His new AI scheduling tool would supposedly reduce fuel usage by exactly 4.2%. He said that number like it was sacred scripture, like decimals made things more believable. He didn't ask me anything, not about Jorge in Santa Ana, who only signs for deliveries between 3:45 and 4:15 p.m. because of his grandson's speech therapy. Not about Hank in Omaha, who won't authorize a shipment unless you compliment his dog. Not about Roy's gout, or Steve from Topeka, who needs a sausage biscuit before unloading a single box. None of that mattered. Kyle had an algorithm. A shiny, soulless machine built on assumptions. He didn't want my input. He wanted me gone, so I gave him what he asked for. I turned in my badge with the kind of grace you earn the hard way. No tears, no drama, just a thumb drive and a half smile. I labeled the drive Transition Notes. Inside was 100 pages of what looked like routing information, but anyone who actually opened it would find outdated supplier contacts, sandwich orders disguised as personnel codes, a Taco Bell map shaped like a pirate ship, and a photo of me wearing a crown made of packing tape, flipping off the camera. And memes, lots of them, because if you're going to fire me, you'd better be sure you understand what you're deleting. They didn't, not even close. Before I left, I sent one quiet email from my personal account. Subject line, Transition Delay, Protocol Plan A. It wasn't a threat, not even a plan, not yet. Just a spark. A single match waiting for the right gust of wind. Then I walked out, past the receptionist who mouthed "what the hell" as I passed, into the morning air that smelled like diesel and burnt coffee. That was my world, the real world. Not their spreadsheet utopia where drivers are variables and everything runs on math without memory. I sat in my car for 5 minutes. Not because I was emotional, because I was calculating. I pulled up my contact list, 29 names. Suppliers, dispatchers, warehouse foremen. People who called me before making a move. People who still believed in handshake logic and loyalty that isn't found in software. I stared at those names and realized what they'd just handed me. Power. Raw, untraceable, non-automatable power. Because Kyle might have had a system, but I had the people. And in logistics, people beat software every time. That morning, I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I didn't storm out yelling about betrayal. I just smiled to myself and started writing. A list, a map, a plan. Because they didn't just remove a name from payroll. They amputated their own operational brain and handed the blood flow to me. I didn't need revenge. I needed time. And by the time they'd figure out what I really did, it would be far too late. The real storm hadn't even started yet. But trust me, it was coming. By the time I pulled into the diner, I already had 3 replies. Rico from Denver said, if I was out, he was out. Trina from Georgia texted me a single line, said they just unlatched their own trailer. Hassan didn't text at all. He called me, asked me where I landed, and said he'd reroute everything by Tuesday. That's what Kyle never understood. This wasn't a system I worked inside. It was a web I had woven, one knot at a time, over 15 years. Every route, every driver, every weird detail, like why you don't schedule Trina's Friday drop because her foreman's in choir rehearsal. Those weren't bugs in the system. They were the system. And now that system was running without its blueprint, without me. I didn't need to sabotage a damn thing. I just had to step back and let the silence do its job. That afternoon, I opened a new document, titled it Alternative Offers, started listing the companies that had once tried to poach me, the ones that sent Christmas baskets and whispered job offers over half-eaten sandwiches at trade shows. Some had deeper pockets, newer trucks, better tools. But I stayed because I believed in what I was building, until they told me I was obsolete. So now, I was making a list. Company names. Then a second column, suppliers most likely to follow me. Then a third, estimated revenue loss if those suppliers pulled out from my old company's network. The numbers weren't guesses, they were data. And they hurt. If even a third of my contacts left, it would wreck their quarter. Half would collapse it entirely. And I hadn't even made a single phone call. Not really. Just hinted. Just breathed. I was sipping lukewarm coffee when the first recruiter message came through. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years. The kind of person with a LinkedIn title like talent synergist or people engineer. Her message was simple. Heard you're on the market. I've got 3 regional VPs who'll want to talk. She sent a calendar link. I didn't click it yet, not because I was unsure, but because I still had one more card to play. I drafted an email to an old contact, a COO at a rival company. One of the few honest ones. We'd once shared bourbon and 3 hours trash-talking consultants. I kept it short, thinking of making a move. Got 29 suppliers on speed dial, and a system that just tried to erase me. You in? I hovered over send, took a sip of my coffee, then clicked. The reply came in less than 10 minutes. Subject line, let's talk today. That was all I needed. Because the difference between Kyle's vision of logistics and mine is simple. He believed in optimization. I believed in loyalty. He had software. I had humans. He had metrics. I had memory. And in supply chains, memory is everything. By Friday, I heard the first crack. A shipment of antibiotic-free chicken breasts missed its delivery window at a major hospital. Driver was stuck 60 miles off course. The system Kyle deployed had rerouted him through an outdated lane without confirming access. The hospital called. Contracts were threatened. Slack channels exploded. Kyle said it was a calibration issue. First week hiccups. Said the system was ingesting legacy anomalies. That's what he called me. A legacy anomaly. I nearly choked on my toast. Because Trina's Friday foreman isn't an anomaly. He's a man with a schedule and a family. Rico's allergy isn't an anomaly. It's why his gloves can't be packed near peanut oil. They weren't data points. They were relationships. Nuance. And Kyle didn't get it. Meanwhile, a second shipment missed the dock window. Then a third. Dispatchers were panicking. Drivers were calling the wrong numbers. Paperwork still had my name on it. Of course it did. Kyle updated the algorithm, not the people. By midday, I got a message from Rico. Want to bet they call by Monday? Trina sent a meme of a dumpster fire with the words, optimized my ass. I didn't feel rage, not even smug, just a kind of quiet satisfaction, like watching dominoes fall that you didn't have to touch. Because Kyle hadn't just replaced me. He'd unplugged the only person who knew how the damn thing actually worked. And now, he was about to learn something the hard way. In logistics, when the backbone walks out, everything else eventually collapses under its own weight. Monday came in like a freight train with no brakes. At 6:38 a.m., Hassan texted me. 3 of his drivers were parked outside a facility in Modesto that had been shut down 18 months ago. I had personally moved that warehouse because the roof leaked every time it rained, and a raccoon named Gerald had taken up permanent residence in the rafters. But the new system, Kyle's shiny algorithm, was still sending shipments to Gerald's house. I didn't even need to dig for details. The mess came to me. A shipment of medical gloves meant for Arizona ended up in Reno, at a building that no longer existed. It had been converted into a vape juice warehouse during the pandemic, and somewhere along the way, the software rerouted time-sensitive insulin to a facility that hadn't passed compliance in 2 years. Trucks were idling. Dispatchers were overwhelmed. Drivers were calling people who no longer worked at the company. All because no one had the nerve to ask the one question that should have come weeks ago. Where the hell is Claire? Back at headquarters, things were coming apart thread by thread. The Slack threads looked like battlefield transcripts, panic pings, missed handoffs, people tagging Kyle like he was a miracle worker. One scheduler, Jenna, who used to shadow me, apparently broke down crying after trying to fix a single rerouted vaccine shipment. The system had no idea Denver wasn't closer to Boise than Salt Lake. Someone tried to call one of the suppliers directly. That supplier simply responded, "Sorry, we're only authorized to speak with Claire." That message got screenshot and passed around like a ghost story. "Didn't we fire her?" someone asked. The mood shifted fast, from confident disruption to controlled collapse. Cheryl, the president's assistant, forwarded me a copy of an internal memo. 3 hospital contracts now in breach. Legal was circling. Accounting had flagged several invoices with mismatched documentation. Someone asked why none of the backup contact maps worked. The folder they were looking for had lived on my desktop, password protected, labeled DND, do not delete. Too late. Meanwhile, I was sitting in a garden cafe watching ducks paddle around a pond, sipping tea with too much cinnamon. My phone was off. My heart rate was steady. For the first time in years, I wasn't juggling a dozen trucks, 3 angry suppliers, and a broken printer at once. I was just a woman with time, and the peace that follows a perfectly executed exit. But it wasn't revenge I was enjoying. It was clarity. I hadn't sabotaged a thing. I had simply walked away and let them figure out what they'd lost. On Tuesday, they dragged in the algorithm vendor, 3 guys in Patagonia vests and overconfident grins. They ran reports, said things like data dependencies and anomaly ingestion. But when they plugged in the thumb drive I left behind, it opened a spreadsheet of Danny DeVito memes. One for every weekday. My personal farewell to the future of logistics. The consultants froze. Kyle sweated through his monogrammed dress shirt. The CEO, Jameson, stood in silence, staring at the original termination document. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He just whispered the line that would echo through their halls for months. All this to save on fuel. The press release dropped Thursday morning. My new role, Director of Supplier Relations at a major competitor, went live at 8:02 a.m. My name printed in bold beneath a logo twice the size of Kyle's kingdom. By noon, 6 of my old suppliers had already sent onboarding requests. 3 more forwarded termination clauses circled in red with the note, "We're out. Where do we sign?" The unraveling wasn't quiet anymore. It was a cascade, a full-blown exodus. I didn't make calls. I didn't post on LinkedIn with hashtags and sunset pictures. I didn't need to. The system that fired me had built its castle on my knowledge. And now, brick by brick, that castle was falling into the sea. By Friday afternoon, the building felt like it had sprung 100 leaks. Vendors were pulling out mid-shipment. One driver reportedly refused to unload a single box until someone explained why his manifest still listed me as the contact. Kyle, in his desperation, had started emailing individual suppliers. He offered them incentives, handwritten thank you notes, bonus days, anything that sounded human. But it was too late. The trust had cracked. One supplier told him plainly, "We don't move unless Claire says so." And Claire had already moved on. Jameson called an emergency board meeting. The term seasonal churn was tossed around like a life vest in a sinking ship, but no one was buying it. not after the headlines. A few trade publications had already picked up on the vendor shift. The timing was too specific, too coordinated. Questions were being asked. Why had half the hospital's supply network jumped ship in 48 hours? Why were former partners refusing calls? And then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Not because I wanted it, but because I knew it was inevitable. It happened in the same glass-walled room where they cut me loose. Same flickering light. Same too cold air. Jameson held up the termination form, my name circled in ink, Kyle's initials smug in the corner under the words cost efficiency. He didn't yell. Didn't even lift his head. He just dropped the paper onto the table and said it quiet and broken. All this to save on fuel. I didn't hear it in person, but Cheryl texted me the exact quote, said the room went dead silent after. That Kyle didn't speak. That someone from HR excused herself to cry in the bathroom. That's when the final shift happened. It wasn't panic anymore. It was realization. The kind that comes when the fire's already halfway through the walls and someone finally sees the gas can. I didn't torch anything. I just left. And without the context I carried, their whole system turned from optimized to blindfolded. That weekend, I got my welcome kit from the new company. Laptop, badge, branded mug, the usual. But it wasn't the gifts that mattered. It was the tone. Every email was respectful. Every introduction was intentional. They didn't just hire me. They listened. My team called me before making any routing updates. My new CEO asked me about the onboarding flow from a supplier's perspective. It was surreal. I wasn't treated like a cog. I was treated like the engine. By Monday, the cracks back at my old workplace had split wide open. A level 3 shipment missed its compliance window. That kind of failure could trigger legal action. The kind with actual damages. The gloves arrived at the wrong node. No paperwork, no chain of custody. When Cheryl was asked where the delivery had gone, she couldn't answer. She said maybe Reno, or maybe Fresno, or maybe a building that doesn't exist anymore. Jameson looked at her like he'd just woken up from a year-long nap into a nightmare. "Who the hell did we just fire?" he asked. Not rhetorical, not angry, just scared. Because he finally understood. They hadn't just restructured. They'd amputated their own command center and hadn't noticed until the blood hit the floor. Meanwhile, I was sipping espresso across town, reviewing onboarding requests from 3 more suppliers. My inbox was full but calm. My calendar was busy but controlled. I had a team that double-checked before rerouting. I had dispatchers who called to clarify instead of assuming. And most of all, I had the one thing I never got at my old job. Respect. They tried to reach me, of course. Cheryl called. Kyle even emailed once, said they just needed my help temporarily, just to stabilize things. Just a few days. I smiled at the screen, typed a short reply. I've moved on. Best of luck. That was all. No bitterness, no gloating. Because I didn't need to shout. I was already heard. Loudest through the silence I left behind. Wednesday morning, I took my usual walk through the Arboretum. Second coffee in hand, sneakers crunching along the gravel. There was a soft breeze, the kind that makes leaves whisper secrets. And then my phone buzzed. Not a text. A call. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something in my gut said, "Pick up." I answered with a quiet, "Yeah." The voice on the other end was tired, cracked from too many long days. "Claire, it's Rico." I stopped walking. Rico doesn't call unless it's serious. He's a man who once negotiated a 6-figure freight contract using only 3 sentences and a hand on someone's shoulder. If he was calling now, it wasn't just a courtesy. It was a signal. "We've been holding back." he said. Trina, Hassan, me. We told our teams to wait. Give it a few days. Let them feel it. And now? He paused. They called this morning. Asked if we'd resume full service. I told them we don't move unless you say go. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just said, thanks for holding the line, Rico. Before he could reply, another call came in. This one I recognized. Cheryl. Loyal Cheryl. Her name popping up now meant one thing. Someone had officially run out of rope. I clicked over. Hi, Cheryl. Her voice was smooth but brittle. Claire, thank you for picking up. I know things ended abruptly. Don't worry, I cut in. I'm not mad. She let out a breath like she'd been holding it for days. Look, I'll be brief, she said. Jameson asked if you'd be willing to consult. Just temporarily. Help stabilize things. I looked around me. Ducks gliding across the pond. A kid tossing crumbs. The sky was too peaceful for the chaos they wanted me to re-enter. I took a sip of coffee, calm and even. I can't. She paused. May I ask why? Because I signed an NDA. Another pause, heavier this time. NDA, she repeated. I nodded to myself. Started with a new firm, Director of Supplier Relations. Their systems are different. I didn't need to say more. Cheryl was smart. She understood the implications. So the competitors got you, she said quietly. I let a beat pass. They didn't get me, I said. They asked for me. Silence stretched between us. Then she spoke again, this time softer. They've lost 5 clients since Monday. 2 more are threatening to walk. That sounds about right, I replied. Can I tell him anything? She asked. You can tell him this, I said. Next time he wants to replace a backbone with a buzzword, maybe check where the blood flow comes from first. She didn't argue. Just said, understood. We hung up. I stood there a moment longer, watching a squirrel bury a nut with the seriousness of a man hiding gold. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was different. A welcome email from my new company's HR portal. Subject line, Welcome aboard, Claire. I opened it. My reflection flickered on the screen. A new chapter, a new team, a new empire. One built on trust, not templates. On relationships, not rules. I turned the phone over, screen down, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I let myself smile. Not the tired smile I used to wear at weekly status meetings. Not the polite one I forced when Kyle said optimization, but a real one, quiet, earned. The kind that comes when you realize you were never the problem. You were the foundation. And they only noticed once the floor was gone. The press release dropped at 8:02 a.m. sharp on Thursday. I was sitting at my desk, soft light pouring through the window, coffee warm, inbox clean. The moment it hit, I watched the first ripple, then the second, and by noon, it wasn't a ripple anymore. It was a wave. The headline was simple. Strategic hire, Claire Beaumont joins as Director of Supplier Relations. Underneath was my quote, safe and polished. But everyone who mattered knew exactly what I was saying. I've chosen my new kingdom, and my people are coming with me. By 1 p.m., 6 of my old suppliers had already emailed my new office asking for onboarding packets. 3 more replied with contracts from the old company, clauses highlighted in red, termination dates circled. They weren't asking for permission. They were declaring allegiance. The dominoes didn't fall one by one. They fell in chunks. Some vendors didn't even send warnings. They just stopped answering Kyle's calls. Cheryl forwarded me an internal memo, marked urgent subject line, rapid vendor attrition. Someone in procurement apparently asked if we could replace our entire distribution chain with FedEx. Another department started using faxes again. Faxes? Jameson called another emergency meeting that afternoon. Same room, same table, different energy. Gone were the confident slides and buzzword optimism. The mood now was quiet desperation. Kyle stood at the far end of the room, sweating through another fitted shirt, trying to look useful. A consultant was brought in. Young, sharp suit, too many acronyms. He talked fast, used words like churn mitigation and recovery mapping. Then someone from the legal team interrupted. We have 5 breach risks and 2 formal termination notices pending. And then came the question, the one that sucked all the air out of the room. Who exactly approved the firing of Claire? No one spoke. Kyle looked down. Cheryl looked away. Jameson didn't look at anyone. He just tapped the edge of the termination form again and again, like it might give him a different answer. The same form he'd initialed under projected savings. They all had. No one had questioned it, because Claire, to them, had been a cost center, a line item, replaceable. They never once stopped to ask what happened if the replacement didn't come with memory, with nuance, with history. They thought they were deleting a name from a spreadsheet, but I was never just a name. Back in my new office, I was onboarding a supplier from the Midwest, one I'd worked with for years. We joked about how long it took Kyle to learn what SKU meant. My new team listened, asked questions, took notes. They didn't pretend to know everything. They knew enough to ask. That alone made them miles ahead. And then, just as I was reviewing an inbound route flow, an email popped up. Subject line, apology. It was from Kyle. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit, let it cool. After 20 minutes, curiosity won. I clicked. It was short. 2 paragraphs. He said he'd underestimated the complexity of the systems I built. That the AI had performed flawlessly in simulations, but collapsed in reality. That he didn't realize how much of the company's rhythm was built on people, not patterns. At the end, he asked if I'd be open to a conversation. I closed the email without replying. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I just had nothing left to give him. The lesson had already been taught. The cost had already been paid. My job now wasn't to fix what they broke. It was to build something better. And that's what I was doing. Brick by brick. With people who didn't need a spreadsheet to tell them I mattered. What happened to Claire wasn't just a tale of corporate downfall. It was a lesson about value, the kind that doesn't show up on spreadsheets. In every industry, the rush to automate, to optimize, to cut corners often forgets the quiet force that holds everything together. People, relationships, experience. The ones who remember birthdays, quirks, allergies, and warehouse shortcuts, no AI can replicate. Claire didn't seek revenge. She sought clarity. She walked away with dignity and watched, silently, as the truth surfaced. That's the power of knowing your worth. When people forget it, the universe has a way of reminding them. Her story isn't about burning bridges. It's about knowing when to stop crossing ones that were never stable. So to anyone who's ever been overlooked, replaced, or undervalued, remember this. Your knowledge, your loyalty, your human touch, it matters. And in the right place, it will be celebrated, not erased. Don't fight to stay where you're only tolerated. Go where you're understood, trusted, heard. The system might forget your name, but the people, the ones who matter, never will. Build with them. And when the silence speaks louder than your voice ever could, know that you've already won.